class. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the very first Lunch and Learn here at our community house. Round of applause for that. Welcome. There are a lot of people here from our community house already members of the space, but we have a few people here from Silicon Beach. So we've got an open co-working day today where members of the meetup group Silicon Beach are here to experience the space for the day and see what it's like. For you guys, our community house is about space dedicated to the social sector. So not-for-profits, B corporations and other organisations who want to make a positive impact in the world. And that's what this space is all about, nurturing and providing space and more for those organisations. I'd like to introduce quickly Athula from Silicon Beach. You want to tell us a little bit about what Silicon Beach is and why you guys are here?
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks everyone for coming from our community house as well as to Silicon Beaches. I can see just a little bit about Silicon Beach. My name is Athula Bovin. I'm the lead organizer of Melbourne Silicon Beach Meetup. And we are actually now a not-for-profit company ourselves, floated last year as Silicon Beach Group. Our idea is to bring all these Silicon Beach meetup communities around Australia under one umbrella and take Australia to number 2 startup nation in the world by 2025. That is our big, hairy, audacious goal. We are called Silicon Beach because Australia's cities are around the beach, so it's a pun on Silicon Valley, but it has now grown quite big and quite serious. We have 13,000 members in the Melbourne Silicon Beach community, so we are the largest in Victoria, and about 23,000 around the country, and now moving to Asia Pacific as well, with communities in Jakarta and Manila. So we are very happy to collaborate with our community house because we are really enthused about encouraging startups to come up with problems, solid solutions to real problems. Most of them come up with solutions like another photo sharing app or another Tinder, but we're not interested in those so much. We want to solve real problems. That's why we are here. So thank you for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure. Let's take a minute to do some logistical comfort making. Come in, Lachlan, grab a chair, rearrange stuff. Excellent, thank you, Gala. Everyone comfy? Yeah? Good. So this speaker series is all about theories of change. So when you're trying to make a difference in the world, you have to have a theory as to how what you do will benefit the world. And that's the theme of this speaker series we're going to run over the next X number of weeks. And yeah, we're going to be talking about how do we make a difference. What's the logic behind or the inspiration behind what we're doing. Before I begin to introduce today's speakers, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. Our community house, management staff and member community acknowledge the land on which this building stands is, was and always will be traditional Aboriginal land. We wish to make note our deep regret that the Indigenous people of this country have been subjected to many injustices and hurtful treatment for more than 200 years. We offer our apology for what has happened. It is our sincere hope that genuine reconciliation can be reached in the near future, and that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and their cultures will be given rightful recognition and respect by all non-Indigenous Australians in a situation of true coexistence. We offer our unqualified support for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, the establishment of a First Nations voice to Parliament, and a Makarrata Commission, a truth-telling. We pay our deep respects to the traditional elders past, present and emerging, and pay special welcome to all First Peoples who join us here today. Our speakers today are Noon and Esmeralda from Brainshot. I won't do more of an introduction than that because it is all about theories of change and why these organisations exist, so you'll have to justify it for yourself. Please welcome them to the stage.
Actually, Esmeralda's going to do the first part of the talk, but I thought I'd just start with a joke.
He asked me, do you want to make a joke? I said, no, you do it.
My joke is, have you noticed that supermarkets are kind of all the same? Yeah. The reason that I think that is because most of us pay with our phone or tap our card, so there's no change anymore.
So after that, you need to laugh more. I'm gonna make a quick introduction about BrainShop, who we are, why we exist, and what we do. And yeah, that's us. So we all know that AI is already part of our reality. It's happening, but it has been crafted just with a small group of people. So not everyone is part of that decision of that technology. So that's what BrainShop want to change. We want to bring diversity, ethical knowledge, and bring more people, more backgrounds into AI. And to do it, we want to do it through education. So currently we have 2 workshops where we are working on. So we have the technical deep learning workshop, who is for professionals who already have some kind of code knowledge, but they want to become better in machine learning and AI. But we also are aware that artificial intelligence is not just for technical people. So everyone, we need to be aware of that. And that's why we have artificial intelligence for leadership, where we really bring this kind of knowledge into all kind of leaders, to think about it, to know what is the path to implement AI into their companies, into their business, and to be aware of the risk, to be aware of the cost, and to be aware of what they are really doing. So we have 2. We are currently doing the technical lead workshop at in here in our community house. But we will have another one the 10th of April and the 16th of March for artificial intelligence for leadership. It's not on this slide, but we also work face-to-face with clients who has more particular problems and they need a crafter design and a crafter solution for their business situation. But we know that we are nothing without the community. So for us, it's really important to create this awareness, to create this free knowledge, these events, and we are really grateful we have our community as our hosts in most of our events, because for us, if we are all aware of what's happening, we can make a change. And in general, this awareness needs to be part of every mind. So that's what we do. Feel free to join us in the post-prediction and conference next week already. We have the Datathon for Social Good, or we are an open session where we will answer questions from every of us, like, okay, Esme, you didn't explain it right, tell me more. We go for a coffee and we talk more about it. We have also a book club that we're gonna be doing with Gala and with Pi Ladies, where we're gonna explain and to bring more awareness of what is that. It's an online course that we're gonna go every week through a chapter and learn how to do it. So don't think that AI is just for technical people, it's also for people who wanna embrace this challenge and be actual in what is happening. And with change, we go for Noam. So Noam is gonna explain us why he is studying BrainShop, how did he do it, and what is our theory of change.
Thanks. Right. So I think I had to look up what a theory of change was. So I one way I wanted to talk about it is just like, what things within the AI community are we kind of interested in seeing? So of course, like one of our kind of main focuses is on kind of the diversity within the AI field. So we kind of just want to just like enrich it and get everyone involved. Esmeralda talked about that. So we want to do it like with decision makers, people that kind of run companies, in terms of products that are out there on the market, in terms of like the makeup of teams, and kind of business leaders. We've also got other aspects of AI that we're interested in outside of like who's doing it, is kind of like how are they doing it. And so, has anyone been reading about like the ethics of AI or fairness? Show of hands. A few people. Yeah, so it's like people are really keen on this, and in particular, there's a lot of kind of, what do they call them? Like government bodies doing work about like what should the rules be? Should there be any regulations? If so, what are they? I think Cyro put out like some kind of guidelines about like, you know, don't do bad things, stuff like that. But like, can you make it more concrete? So that's something we try and get involved in when we can. And then kind of like Esmeralda said, it's like we're really just interested in like bringing new people into the community, bringing people together, and really, does anyone know who all these groups of people are? Good luck if you know. The answer is supporting actors. So like we basically see ourselves as kind of like supporting other people in the field. So we're not necessarily doing anything ourselves, we're just kind of supporting people. And yeah, big one is collaborating, like excited to collaborate with the OC Data Lab on the Datathon. So, yeah, so like, I had a meeting like a month ago with a business person, and they kind of like, were like, here's what you should have a business plan, and also here's what it should look like. Yeah, and they kind of like drew it on a napkin. And I was like, oh yeah. Not bad. It's always nice like when people are interested. So it's kind of like, okay, I guess kind of what I'm wondering is like, I've talked about the ideas we have, but how do we do them? And how do we like see that progress is happening? You know, and kind of like one standard idea maybe is like a business plan. Maybe you can have like one of these one-page thingies, like a napkin. You know, you can of course have kind of like the key performance indicators and the, I think the OKR stands for like objectives and key results. Correct me if I'm wrong, also I have no idea what they are. But in any case, it's an acronym I've heard. You could do this like lean canvas thing where you kind of like try and roughly sketch out what your business is and so on. You could have a design sprint if you're interested. Or my favorite is like you could just put stuff in Trello and then like it could sit in to do and then you could like move it to done. Right? That's like a very trackable way of like seeing my progress. Yeah. Is there another idea? Does anyone want to call out other ideas that I've missed? I thought of one while I was writing this. Does anyone know what it is? It's a classic at really big tech events. What, Agile? Yeah, Agile is definitely in this space, yeah. The thing I was thinking of is a slide deck. You can chop your slide deck around and do things like that. But actually, does anyone know who this person is? Or have you heard of Christopher Alexander? One person has. 2 people have. Anyone else? 3. Gala doesn't count. So he's written a lot of books about building houses, roughly. And so I've kind of got like a selection of his books up there. But when I read them, I was quite inspired. And basically, one of the funniest things, not funny, it's a little bit sad, that he thinks about is like, when you go into a building, does it make you feel really, really good? You know, and I think the point is like for all of us to think about like what buildings when we walk in do we feel exceptionally good? And like obviously I'm gonna say obviously house makes me feel that way. But there are like other kind of really beautiful buildings. Like for me the State Library, the kind of like the dome and that library thing, I just feel really good when I go in there. Does anyone have any others? It could be from anywhere in the world.
A park with lots of trees.
A park, yeah.
Beach home.
Beach home.
I'm blank. I mean, I know the answer, but I'm blank.
So the point is like, I just kind of imagine Christopher Alexander walking around like really sad that all the buildings that he goes into don't make him feel exceptionally good. And for whatever reason that was funny. But like what he's really all about is like, well, what is it that makes buildings feel that way? And in particular, how can I actually construct them? And so he uses this kind of idea of what he calls a pattern language. Has anyone heard of this pattern language thing? Same, usual suspects. So roughly the idea here is that you kind of don't fill in too many details. So you kind of just say, well, at first I want like a family home. And then you kind of fill in the details. Well, like what kind of activity centers do I want in there? Maybe I want like a play area, like a private reading space, you know, a sunny place by a tree. And so in that fashion, you kind of first draw a really vague diagram of what you want. And then as you go, you fill in the details. Okay, so that's what I mean by fill details downwards. And the contrast is basically where you would kind of go on a website and like look at all the individual bits of furniture, buy them, and then kind of jam them together, let's say. I mean, I just compared interior designing and building a house, but hopefully roughly what I'm trying to say makes sense. It's like you can start really specific at the bottom, or you can start really vague at the top. Does that make sense? Great. And so another thing that he was really excited about was this idea of kind of the people that should design the space should be the ones who live in the space. And so I think that is certainly quite in vogue now, at least in the tech world with this, I think I've got a slide up, but about human-centered design and kind of like engaging with people, finding out like this bit of software you want, what's it gonna do, you know? So this is kind of like a very in vogue idea. Here's my theory. A business is kind of like a building, okay? Does anyone buy that? Not a single person buys it. One person buys it. It's very exciting because by the end of the talk, you're all gonna buy it. Righto. So yeah, I've got this book, The Timeless Way of Building. I guess I just kind of wanted to show you an example of some patterns. So these are some. So you can see that like, nothing here is necessarily too specific. Like this one really kind of stuck in my mind. He called it a pattern for the kind of entryway to your house. And he was saying it's really nice if your house has like a partially public, partially private entrance. So you can like take off your shoes or put down the shopping. What I want to get across to you here is there's nothing too complicated about what a pattern is. It's just kind of like a goal, like, you know, like a constraint. It's just a thing that you want. Does that make sense? Okay. So here we go. So we came up with some patterns for the kind of workshops that we run. So our idea is like, well, you know, we want to be covering new stuff. We want it to be like small. We want to use like the latest kind of software. Does that make sense? Okay. So,
what do you mean by strong pedagogical?
Oh, great. Well, it just means like, maybe I want to chat to a teacher and work out how to teach things, rather than kind of like just do whatever I think is a good idea. That's roughly what I mean. And like more specifically, it's like there should be some kind of teaching theory behind the style. So what I'm going to try and talk to you about is like, I think this kind of pattern language style of thinking about a business is interesting. Here's 3 reasons why. One of the ones I got the most excited about was this idea of like diagnosing where you're at versus planning where you want to be. And I think this one's really quirky, and I found it really powerful. So this is a picture from a different book called The Oregon Experiment. And what it is like, oh, maybe I'll just go to the next slide. So what it is like, it's a map of the existing University of Oregon. And for a certain pattern, what he's done is he's colored in places that are red as places that don't meet that pattern. Like they don't have, let's say, nice open space. And yellow for places that partially do. Does this idea make sense? So you pick an axis, like let's say nice green area, and then you evaluate your kind of, in his case, building, in our case, business, on that axis. Does that make sense? Great, so for an example, for a paint shop, me and Esmeralda like sat down with all the kind of patterns we made up last year at the end of last year and kind of just thought about how the business went across all these axes. I don't think this is necessarily incredibly innovative, but I just think about it in terms of this pattern language style. Does that idea make sense? Okay. I think we'll get to it in a little bit, but one of the reasons that this is interesting is this is actually quite different than planning, right? Where planning would be you sit down at the end of the business and you go like, okay, well, where do we want to be next year? So actually this is something different. This is like actually how did we go on across all these aspects that we thought were important? And then of course we have to think up new aspects. But right, here's the second idea. This apparently is like the construction by nature of a frog's leg, okay? And the idea here is, what I'm trying to show you here is this idea of where I said kind of top down, vague, becomes specific. This is a kind of idea of that. So the point is like, well, they start off with like a blob, and then they kind of fill in more details and more details until you get a hand. It's not that like over here, you started off with this joint, this joint, this joint, and then you kind of like added the next joint. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I think there's a really good example of this idea of kind of what he calls differentiation or unfolding. Okay, any questions about that? Yes?
I have a question, but wouldn't the plan for that already be in the DNA?
I think it's an interesting thing to think about. But like, I don't believe, but whether or not the plan is in the DNA, you can at least agree that the construction takes place incrementally. And so the construction isn't, first of all, place bone there. It's like, let's kind of build up roughly. Does that make sense? Yeah, so how I kind of imagine this is like, how this is related to human-centered design is like, this blob is kind of getting feedback from the context around it, working out what to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. I thought I guess what I kind of want to say is like, one of the reasons that this like vagueness becoming more specific as you go is hopefully relatable via the problem of like the pointless KPI, which is kind of like, why am I doing this thing? It doesn't align with our goals. And maybe one of the problems is because it's too specific. Okay? You kind of over-specified that KPI before you knew the surrounding context. Does that make sense? This is the last reason that this is interesting, and also kind of like the most complicated. But what you can see here, maybe here is an easier point to start, is for a given building, he's kind of written down 36 aspects, right? He's written down 36 patterns that he wants to have in this building, and then he's computed how they're related. So maybe like in our example of the public-private entryway, that's kind of related to our garden space or something. So those two kind of patterns are related. And so then the question is, if you're going to provide something that kind of solves those patterns, well, how do you do it? And the idea is that you have to think of kind of all the things that are related and then like break them up into chunks and then solve those chunks. Does that idea make sense? So that's what these circles are here. It's like taking these 5 problems of my house are all related, so I want to try and solve them with the same tool. Yes?
Would you, based on that theory, would you start looking at ones like, to say that I think it's 26, where it's in like 2 circles?
Yes.
Would you start with those kind of ones and start, because it fills more needs? Is that like a starting point?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Actually, I think in this book, he doesn't go into detail about which one to solve first. But overall, there's definitely this idea of like, especially these ones, which are kind of in 2, it's like, I agree with you that this kind of feels like important to get those right. So maybe you would focus time there first. Yeah, it's a good question. Any other questions about that diagram? Right, so I think it's a powerful idea. And I think I've rambled to several people about this idea, but I think like by having these kind of constraints, like you must solve this thing and that thing with the same tool, I think it leads to better solutions. I think this is one of the reasons that. Sorry, I should also say like vagueness helps. So with it not being too specific, it helps you to be able to solve it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Great. So that is one set of weird ideas that I think like go into how I want to think about BrainShop. So there's a few other books and like a few blog posts about it that we won't go into. But what I think that this system is useful for is like helping us decide who we work with, how big we want to grow, like how we decide if we've succeeded, kind of really what are our goals, like short term and long term, and kind of like moreover like who within the business gets to decide where we go. Does that make sense? So I'm just trying to say, I think this approach is quite, even maybe it sounds very fluffy, I feel it very practically. That's it. Thanks, and we'll take questions. Yeah, back the slide. Oh, okay.
Could you slap me a link to the blogs?
Yes. And yes, Scarlett, question.
Can you give an example, like, because you've given us examples in a house,
Yes.
but for a part of BrainShop, like maybe with a workshop or with something, can you give me like, how did you start with the blob and then reach the hand, or are you still at the blob part?
Great question. I think maybe one way to think about it is like, probably originally wanted our workshops to be like 20 people each time. And what we've now changed to is like, well actually let's make it really small instead. And so I think that how that helps, I guess I just think of it, I think about it as being flexible. So it's like at the start of this year, we didn't set goals. We didn't say like, well, we want to run 8 workshops a year, have 100 people through them. I think I've seen a lot of people that do these kind of workshops say things like, well, we want to teach 1 million people each year. And it's like, actually, don't care about that. Like, I just want to kind of, instead of talking about outward goals, I want to talk about like inward requirements of the workshop. Does that make sense? The rambling. Another question.
No, it's not a question.
Ah.
I'm just trying to figure out in my mind. What you explained to me, I see the analogy I would use for that would be, you want to reach the top of a mountain, but you don't know what that vision is yet.
Yes.
So it's taking the path, just taking the first step, going with the flow, and as you go along, you figure things out, go off path a bit, go on path a bit. Is it a bit?
Exactly.
Like that? And then when you reach the top, you see a vision, you think, wow,
Yeah.
awesome view.
Yes.
But then you can see ahead of you.
I would even
So
say.
it's the learning along the way. Right?
Yeah.
It's not so much the destination, but the journey
Totally.
on the way to get
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that how?
Yeah, and I would even ambitiously say like roughly there really is no vision. You know, like I kind of like.
That's what I mean, because you
Yeah.
don't know until you get to the top
Yeah.
what the view would be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are the design patterns, are these kind of your values? Is that what drives you, or like?
Are the design patterns our values? Kind of. I think so. I think is the answer. Like some of them, I mean, they're on one of the blogs there. Like some of them are definitely around this idea of like, I guess what I tried to do in the blogs is talk a little bit about 4 different aspects of the business. What are the patterns? And so like as a business, one of them is to kind of increase diversity. So yeah, I guess they kind of roughly are these values. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I also have a recommendation. A book recommendation actually.
Brilliant.
I don't know if you have read it. I forgot who the author is, but the book is called Finite Games and Infinite Games.
Yeah.
I think this seems more like, because it's not do not so much on like KPIs and reaching certain target. It seems more like, I guess you're playing not to win, but you play to keep playing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like text-based, like the text-based games.
Yes.
Extremely limited.
Nina.
For someone who doesn't understand AI, couldn't even say what it is.
Uh-huh.
If we're thinking about the analogies we used around building a house and climbing a mountain, why are you building a house?
Ah, yeah.
And why are you climbing a mountain?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, so like, I kind of, definitely we do have things that this is kind of why the first slide was about, like, what kind of things do we want to see in the AI world? Like, and kind of Esmeralda talked about it, but it's this idea of like, well, having worked in the industry for a while, like I just see a lot of projects that are bad, you know, and all this kind of stuff, so it's just like, well, let's get more people involved. So that's kind of like the why of like, why are you even doing AI education? Does that answer your question a bit?
Possibly. And maybe this is just a completely, perhaps, this is a step beyond. I don't even know. Like, I guess if you're talking about you're doing this to get more diversity
Yes.
in AI, like what is, like how do you explain to people what AI is?
That's what it would mean to you to know what AI is. So the education we do is also to bring you into the conversation. So if we leave this conversation just for technical people,
Yeah.
most of us, we're gonna be out.
Yeah.
So we
So-
want to,
Yeah. So I guess I still don't understand. So for me, this still feels quite exclusive.
Yes.
So I guess I'm not sure how.
Well, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
My brain's going.
Yes.
So, I know in Finland, the education there, for instance, they've only got 4 days, 4 hours a day, that they go to school, yet they are getting better marks, doing better, that's besides the point. But I know, for instance, they will get the kids involved in learning is such that they get the kids, say if they have to do the playground, they get the architects in and they get the kids involved and ask them, what do you think?
Yes.
And they get involved, and that's how they do the learning, so more in the experience of what they're doing rather than learning in theory. Is that what you are saying? By I don't know. Sorry.
Maybe I'll take a third question. And then till we get to one I can answer.
More specifically relating to theory of change, what do you see as your sphere of control, sphere of influence, sphere of interest?
Yes. Great question. Maybe just to quickly attempt to answer the first two is like, if your question is like, does this experience right now look like what the AI workshop is, or is the AI workshop like taught in a different style and kind of like?
I think I'm just like, if this is your theory of change.
Yes.
I guess to be honest, I'm still not entirely sure what you do and what you're changing.
Indeed.
Which is
Brilliant. So
I
that's a
just,
similar question.
because I have absolutely no idea
Yes.
about AI. So from someone
Right.
completely, and I couldn't explain to someone else.
Here's a very simple example, which is like, basically all of the kind of AI engineers and programmers, like 90% are men.
Yeah.
And so what we do, like, is we've got this scholarship to give a discount to the workshop to people that identify as underrepresented. So like, that's a concrete action. We're like, hey, there's too many men kind of like just working in this AI space. If you believe you're underrepresented, then we'll just make it easy for you to get access. Okay. Does that help?
Yeah.
Accessing what? You want to
The
know what
workshop.
AI is? Do you want-
Yeah, like I don't know. I
What
guess
is
I
AI?
suppose what it is, like if
I think
if
Gala
it's-
wants to answer this question.
I'm wondering, like, if it's around.
I think that maybe the presentation has just made it confusing because the presentation is about the business model, not
Not
the
the
business
business.
itself.
Yeah.
And I think that I actually can't speak for the theory of change because what you just said about the spheres of influence, And granted, I'm very biased because I'm Nune's partner, so I know a lot more than a regular person. But mostly I think that so the workshops are just like, literally like people that are non-programmers need to learn about AI because it's affecting their world. And as such, the business is fully founded on like, well, how can we help do that? And the answer is workshops. From a financial place, the way it's set up is so that like people, everyone who can pay. But if you are from an underrepresented, the business model is set up so that people from underrepresented backgrounds can have really easy access and entry. Like, and one of the examples is that they tend to have unlimited scholarship spots in their workshops. So I think from a business perspective, that's that. Now, from a business model of thinking about a business, and I don't know enough about theory of change to say how that links to BrainShop's business model, but I think having chatted to Esmeralda and Noon, one of the things that they're doing very differently is if tomorrow the community of AI changes, what they want is to change with it, not to force the circle into the square, which is what's happening currently in the space of AI, which is like, there's all these people saying things like, we're gonna teach 1 million people how to code. And it's like, what does that mean? Are they gonna become programmers? Are they gonna understand? And so what they're doing is kind of like, our current impact is to try and get more people into AI. Now, if tomorrow that stops happening, tomorrow the representation is a microcosm of the entire world, then that might no longer be our focus and we might have to change it. And I think what he's saying is we're okay with that. We will get there. I don't know if that clarifies things.
I guess for you guys as well, it's important that you have in that diversity because, like in however many examples, if things are made by one type of person, then you're going to get results and desired outcomes for that one type of person. So like when all the emojis were first made, they were all male because they were all made by men, so they just didn't even think about it.
Yeah, and this is a classic example of basically some kind of technical work that some people have done that has led to a kind of more fair result. And so what it is basically just like, you're asked for this image to write a little text describing what's in the image. And you can see that it said, well, it's a man sitting at a desk with a computer. But what they've added is a kind of like an explanation layer. And so the explanation here is that, well, when it wrote that label, it was thinking about the computer, not the person sitting behind the computer. And so they can kind of do some technical detail that makes the AI kind of look in the right spot when it has to make that judgment. Okay, so that's just an example of like some of the kind of technical work you can do. Yes?
I comment. I actually attended one of the workshops, and I'm in the technical space. And one of the difference between his workshops and any other that you can have in the industry is that usually if you find a course online or if you go to any technical industry, there will be like do this step, learn how to code, and then you're a master in this. Well, Nune has a little section on how to interpret the data that you're analyzing, and it has a section on how to see the ethical side of what you're doing. So it's like an extra addition. It's technical, but also the human part of the technical task, right?
Thanks,
Is
yeah.
that right?
Thanks. Yeah.
Would it help if provide examples of where we may have interacted with AI and not be aware of it? So things like when you use, say, Google Map, right? That's machine learning. So say, when you make a wrong turn, it starts to readjust, and then so that would be a common example, for example, where we may have interacted with and not be aware that that is machine learning. So can you maybe provide other examples?
Maybe another kind of classic one that's actually quite bad that really came about as a result of kind of like failed thinking was one of these cars that didn't identify a pedestrian only when it was standing on the road, which seems like an obviously huge mistake, but like just the way that they'd kind of done their training is it only identified pedestrians when they were standing on the footpath, the pedestrian walk thing. And so that's an example of it's a real, I believe the article that I'm thinking about in that instance, it had fatal consequences. But like, it's just a very serious problem. That's one example. And so what I've got, here I've got a lot of other kind of like weird, quirky examples of AI. This is one of my favorite ones. Brian Obama and Oprah Johansson are kind of in the middle there. And I have to share this one with you if it's here because it's my favorite. It's my favorite one of all time. Which is like they can use deep learning to take an objectively not funny scene, like two people having dinner, and automatically convert it into a funny scene of two cats having dinner. Hilarious, right? And like likewise, like a very non-funny scene of two cats playing in the park with a hilarious scene of a chipmunk riding a scooter.
But what about some in the real world?
Sorry?
Do you have some other ones that are more pragmatic, more real to us in our everyday world?
Face recognition or algorithms.
Yeah.
Like we all use social media.
Netflix,
Exactly.
algorithms.
Everything you search online. So everything affects
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, every time you click a like or like Facebook, for example, you scroll, they can actually tell whether you're looking at that photo or that video for 2 seconds or 5 minutes because you're giving them data.
Then you will have ads.
Yeah, you have ads on it.
Yeah, so roughly like, So this is like a pretty common, it's going to be very common very soon, is on all these kind of retail shops, is like you want to try this item on. Well, what about just kind of turning on your webcam and then it puts it on you? So that's a pretty, like this paper is like 5 years old. So you're going to see this coming.
Can I give one example
Yes.
of an algorithm in the real world that touches a little bit on the sort of bias? Is a few years ago, if you had Spotify and it picked up that you were a female listener, all of a sudden it would recommend you only female singers. And it was like, oh, you're a woman, so you must listen to chick stuff. And it was like this really dumb, like, didn't sort of take into account any other sort of flavour of the music that you're listening to. It was just like, oh, you're a woman, here's your recommended playlist. And it was like super obvious. I think it's gotten better now. But it's like something that you interact with and don't really think about, and then it just wasn't serving women as well as it was serving men.
There was a case in 2012, I think, in the UK where a lady was a member of a gym club and she was trying to use their card to access the bathroom and it wouldn't allow her. And they couldn't figure out why, but she was a valid member. And they found out that she was a doctor, so her time was Dr. So-and-so, and the system was set up that they recognised doctor as a man. And because she was trying to get into a female bathroom, they thought, no, you must not be a member, you can't get in. Yeah, so that's the sort of stuff that you guys would educate people on, like in terms of bias and, if you have 90% of men being, engineers creating these algorithms, then you're going to have bias.
Who's the target audience that you're trying to cater to? Is it the enterprise, corporate, or is it individual?
Yeah, for the workshops, it's basically, so there's these two, so you've kind of got, for the technical one, it's basically programmers and data scientists. And then for the kind of leadership one, it's really like, enterprise kind of, the way we think about that one is like, you should be wanting to like embark on like $100,000 worth of project at least.
So Brainshop objective is basically to conduct workshops, is it?
Yes.
And that's the way you're making the change,
Yes.
right? So it is through workshop that you're going to make the change.
And the community. And through these lots of community kind of
Okay,
ways.
so and this community. And okay, so then the target audience is enterprises, engineers, but also I think you touched upon early influencing, right? People who are going to start into STEM or IT or basically need to understand what AI is. Right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to call it there because we're coming to the end of lunch hour. Please thank Miriam and Miranda. A couple of things. Find out more at brainshop.com.au.
Sure.
Correct.
A lot of stickers.
Stickers and stuff like that.
Flyers.
February 18th is your post-prediction unconference. Excellent.
Yeah.
Next week, on Tuesday, we're going to be hearing from Stephen Carbone from Prevention United. Prevention United develop, policies, awareness, and best practices around how we make mental health something that's we look after properly in our businesses and our society. Is that right? So stay tuned for that next Tuesday, the 18th, at 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Again, thank you all for coming to our first lunch and learn. And once again, thanks to you, Esmeralda.
Thanks, man.